In the City of London this week, important talks happened between the United States and China. These were high-level meetings with officials from both governments. The U.S. team included important people like the Treasury Secretary and the Commerce Secretary. China sent their vice premier and other key representatives for trade. These talks are very important because they aim to fix big problems. The main purpose of these discussions was to solve the disagreements in the trade relationship between the two countries. For some time now, the U.S. and China have had many problems with trade. These problems have led to what many people call a trade war. This has created a lot of tension and made things difficult for many businesses and workers. One of the biggest problems is about tariffs. Tariffs are extra taxes put on goods that are imported from another country. Both the U.S. and China have put very high tariffs on products they buy from each other. For example, if a company in the U.S. wants to buy something from China, or a company in China wants to buy something from the U.S., the tariff can make it much more expensive. This has hurt trade. Another important issue is about technology and special minerals. The U.S. has put limits on its companies selling certain advanced technology to China. They are worried about national security and competition. China has responded by limiting exports of important minerals, such as rare earths. These minerals are needed to make many modern products, like mobile phones, computers, electric cars, and even defense equipment. The U.S. wants to ensure it can get these minerals easily, and China wants the U.S. to stop limiting technology sales. These disagreements about tariffs, technology, and minerals have caused a lot of tension and uncertainty for global markets and supply chains. Recently, the leader of the United States, President Donald Trump, and the leader of China, President Xi Jinping, had a phone call. This call was a key step before the talks in London. It showed that both sides were serious about trying to find solutions. The officials meeting in London hope to find agreements. They want to ease the tensions and find ways to make trade flow more easily again. Finding a positive outcome could help businesses and economies in both the U.S. and China to grow stronger. It could also help markets around the world feel more stable after a time of difficulty. People are watching closely, hoping that these talks will lead to real progress and help end the trade war. A successful meeting could mean less uncertainty and more cooperation in the future of trade between these two very important countries. It is a difficult task, but the hopes are high for a positive result that benefits everyone. 2. The big problems. The high-level talks in London had big problems to discuss. There were two main issues that caused trouble between the United States and China. One big problem was about special minerals called rare earths. These minerals are very important. You need them to make many modern things. For example, they are used in mobile phones, electric cars, and equipment for the army. China has a lot of these rare earth minerals. In fact, China controls about 70% of the world's supply. But lately, China has made it harder to get these minerals. They put limits on how many can be sent to other countries. The United States needs these minerals for its factories and companies. The U.S. side said China was not approving licenses quickly enough. This means it was slow for companies to get permission to buy and export the minerals. U.S. officials said this was a major difficulty. President Donald Trump and his team said getting these minerals was very important for the U.S. The other big problem was about technology, especially advanced computer parts. The United States has stopped its companies from selling some very advanced technology to China. This includes special computer chips and machines needed to make them. The U.S. said this was important for its own security. But China was very unhappy about these U.S. rules. China said these actions were unfair. They said the U.S. was trying to stop Chinese companies from growing and becoming strong in technology. China pointed to rules that affected companies like Huawei, saying the U.S. was being difficult without good reason. So, the U.S. and China had different problems. The U.S. wanted rare earth minerals from China, and China wanted the U.S. to stop limiting technology sales. Both sides made accusations. The U.S. said China was being slow with minerals. China said the U.S. was being unfair with technology rules. These two difficult issues were the main focus for the people meeting in London. Finding a way to solve these problems was necessary if they wanted trade between the two countries to improve. It was not easy because both sides felt strongly about their positions. 3. New fights start. Before the important talks in London, the two countries had more problems with trade. In the year 2025, fights over trade became worse. Both the United States and China put new high taxes on goods coming from the other country. These taxes were very high, more than 100% on many things. This made trade very difficult. Then, in May, a short time before the London meeting, the countries tried to stop the fighting. In a city called Geneva, they made a temporary deal. President Donald Trump of the United States announced this deal. It was a peace for 90 days. The deal said that the U.S. would lower its high taxes on Chinese goods. China would also lower its taxes on U.S. goods. But this peace did not last long. It ended very fast. Soon after the deal was made in Geneva, new problems started. Both sides said the other side was not keeping the promise. U.S. officials said China was slow to let important materials leave the country. China said the U.S. put new limits on technology and other things. The promises from Geneva quickly broke. Because the peace ended, the trade problems became bad again. The new fights had effects on trade numbers. For example, in May, the amount of goods China sent to the U.S. fell a lot. This was a big drop. Data also showed that China sent much less of some important minerals to other countries. These new problems showed that the trade war was getting worse before the two sides came to London to talk again. 4. Money worries for all. Businesses in the United States faced problems because of the trade issues. It cost them more money to buy parts and materials from China. Sometimes it was hard to get the parts they needed at all. This was true for companies making phones, cars, and other products that use parts from China. American shoppers also saw effects. Things they bought from stores, like furniture or computers, started to cost more because of the new taxes on goods from China. Many people and companies bought a lot of goods from China early in the year before the prices went up even more. This helped the U.S. economy a little bit then, but it also meant that later, in May, fewer goods came from China to the U.S. Businesses worried about people buying less. Surveys showed that companies in the U.S. felt less positive about the future. Experts said that the higher costs from trade taxes could make prices rise more generally later on. One study suggested that the problems between the U.S. and China could make the world economy grow about 0.5% slower in 2025 than it would have without the trade fight. U.S. factories that make things like wind power machines, equipment for the Army, and electric cars need certain parts from China. Now, some of these parts are hard or impossible to get. This makes it hard for these factories to work and grow. Not knowing when things will get better makes it hard for companies to plan, which can also mean fewer jobs. China's economy, which sells a lot of goods to other countries, also felt the pain. Fewer goods were being sold outside of China. This made things difficult for factories there. People who study China's economy now think it will not grow as fast as they thought this year. Official numbers showed that in May, China sold about 34.5% less goods to the U.S. compared to the same time last year. The amount of rare earth minerals, which are very important for many products, that China exported also fell a lot, by nearly half in value in May. Companies around the world that use these minerals, like car makers, became worried about not getting enough parts. China's central bank has even thought about lowering the cost of borrowing money to try and help the economy. China's money, the yuan, became weaker for a short time, which showed worries about the economy. People who invest money in the world stock markets became nervous. When the high taxes on goods were announced in April, markets went down fast. When there was talk of a possible deal in May, markets went up again. This showed how sensitive the markets are to the trade fight. Large international groups that work for the world economy warned about the dangers. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, said in April that the rising problems over trade and the sudden changes in rules could make it harder for businesses and people around the world to borrow money. They said it could also slow down how much the global economy grows. Experts agreed that the fight between the U.S. and China was a danger to the way goods move around the world and could lead to slower economic growth for everyone. Countries in Europe, Asia, and other places were also affected and worried. They sell things to both the U.S. and China and need trade to flow smoothly. They asked the U.S. and China to solve their problems. They said that when these two big countries make big, sudden changes to trade rules, it hurts economies everywhere. At a recent meeting, finance leaders from the richest countries said that problems with trade rules are a big risk for the world economy being stable. Companies that work in many different countries have asked the governments to find a solution. They said that when the rules keep changing and no one knows what will happen, it makes it hard to invest money or create jobs anywhere in the world. 5. Old stories, new talks. The trade talks happening now in London are part of a very long story. The United States and China have traded goods for many, many years. For a long time, trade between the two countries grew a lot, especially after China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. More goods were bought and sold, and companies from both countries did business together. This period saw a lot of cooperation, but there were also some disagreements about trade rules. Over time, the disagreements became bigger fights. This started to happen more during President Donald Trump's first time as president, from 2017 to 2021. In 2018, the United States put extra taxes, called tariffs, on many goods coming from China. The U.S. government said China was not trading fairly, for example, by making U.S. companies share their technology. China also put tariffs on goods from the United States. This was the start of what many people called a trade war. Both sides put more and more taxes on each other's goods. It was a difficult time for businesses and farmers in both countries. Then, in January 2020, the U.S. and China signed a partial deal called the Phase 1 Agreement. In this deal, the U.S. stopped some planned tariffs, and China agreed to buy more things like food and energy from the U.S. However, this deal did not remove all the tariffs, and many of the big problems were not solved. It felt more like a short stop in the fight, not the end of it. After that, tensions stayed high. Even after President Trump's first time ended, the tariffs mostly stayed. Now, with President Trump president again in 2025, the trade issues are even bigger. The things that happened in the past, like the start of the tariffs in 2018 and the Phase 1 deal, are important for understanding the talks today. The negotiators in London remember the problems from before. They remember how difficult it was to reach agreements, and how quickly past deals, like the recent one in Geneva in May, did not work out. This history makes everyone careful during the current talks. Also, the trade problems are not just about buying and selling anymore. They have become part of a bigger competition between the two countries. It is about who has the best technology and who controls important resources. So, the talks in London are not just about trade rules. They are also about this larger rivalry that has grown over the last few years, building on the old trade disputes that started a long time ago and got worse after 2018. 6. What smart people say. People who study trade and the economy have different ideas about the talks in London. Some experts are not very hopeful. They say the problems between the two countries are very big and old. It will be hard to fix everything fast. These experts think the talks might only bring small steps forward. One idea is that China might let more rare earth minerals go to other countries. In return, the United States might make some technology rules less strict. But the U.S. will likely keep some important rules on technology. Companies that use these minerals or technology are watching closely. Some worry that even if there is an agreement, it might not change things a lot for them right away. Other people are more hopeful about the London meetings. They think the talks show that both sides want to find a way to stop the trade problems from getting worse. President Donald Trump, who is the President of the United States, asked for these talks. He said he thought the meeting would go well. People who support President Trump think a small deal on minerals or other things could help American businesses, like farmers. This could be good before the election later this year. The place of the talks, London, is a neutral city. This shows that other countries also hope the U.S. and China can find a way to talk and trade more easily. Chinese media and officials also have ideas about the talks. They say China's rules on exports are fair and legal. They follow China's own laws. They say the United States also uses rules to protect its country. Chinese people say that if the U.S. wants China to change its rules, the U.S. must change some of its rules too. Any deal must be fair to both sides. Economists who study money and how countries make money also have different thoughts. Some economists think that if the U.S. and China can make a deal, even a small one, it could help stop prices from going up so much. It could also help factories work better in both countries. This could be good for the world economy. But many economists still worry. They say that the trade problems are making the world economy grow slower. It is like a heavy weight on growth. They say that if the two countries keep putting high taxes on each other's goods, it hurts everyone. Some economists note that companies in the U.S. have found ways to deal with the problems, like finding new places to buy things. So maybe the pain is not as bad as it could be for some businesses. Most smart people think that any agreement from the London talks will probably be small. It might help with some specific problems like rare earth minerals or certain technology rules. But they do not think it will be a big deal that solves all the trade problems between the United States and China. The big disagreements are still there. Groups that represent farmers and companies hope for a good outcome. They hope that trade can become easier and more certain. 7. Hopes for London. People had hopes for the trade talks in London. Top officials from the United States and China met to talk about difficult problems. Both sides wanted to find a way to improve trade between their countries. For the United States, one main goal was about rare earth minerals. These minerals are very important for making phones, computers, and cars. China has most of these minerals. The U.S. wanted to make sure China would send these minerals easily again. U.S. leaders said they hoped for a clear agreement on this. President Trump said he thought the talks would go very well. China also had important goals. China wanted the U.S. to change some rules about technology. The U.S. had stopped selling some technology to China, like parts for special computer chips. China felt these rules were unfair and wanted the U.S. to stop them. Officials from both countries hoped that if they could agree on these points, it would help trade. It could make things easier for businesses and help the economies. People hoped that finding solutions would calm worries in the markets around the world. But it was not easy. The minerals and the technology rules were the biggest problems. It was hard to agree because both countries felt strongly about these things. The United States wanted minerals for its factories, and China wanted the U.S. to lift rules on its technology companies. Also, the last short agreement they made in another city, Geneva, did not work for long. Both sides said the other did not follow the agreement. So in London, they needed to make sure any new agreement was clear and that both sides would keep their promises. They needed to build more trust than before. The talks were a chance to make things better, even with the big problems they had to discuss. 8. What happens next? The talks in London finished. Officials from the United States and China met for 2 days. After the meeting, they made statements about what happened. People waited to hear the results. Maybe they agreed on something small. The United States wanted China to send rare earth minerals again. China wanted the United States to be less strict about sending technology. The officials said the talks were okay. They talked about the difficult problems, like controls on technology and the supply of rare earths. It is possible they will meet again in the future. Both countries need to decide if they made enough progress in London to keep talking. President Donald Trump is the President of the United States now, and he wants to see good results. But even if they meet again, the big problems are still there. It is hard for the two countries to agree completely on trade and technology rules. They have very different ideas. The world is watching. Other countries want the United States and China to trade peacefully. Problems between them can hurt businesses and people everywhere. So, what happens next? It is not fully clear. The talks in London might be a small step, or just a pause. The relationship between the United States and China in trade is still difficult. It might be a long competition. What do you think will happen next between the United States and China?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.